Artemis II is NASA's mission to the moon. Launching in early 2026, it will be the first time that humans have visited the moon in over 50 years, but it's more like a test flight. 4 astronauts will launch on a 10-day journey to the far side of the moon using the most powerful manned rocket to date. Today, I'm going to break down the Artemis II mission for you in 3 parts: the spacecraft, the mission, and the crew. So let's go. So let's explain the Artemis II spacecraft real quick. So the whole rocket that they're using is called the Space Launch System, or usually just called the SLS. And this is just going to be a quick overview since I have a whole other in-depth video on it. It has 2 solid rocket boosters on both sides, a lot like the Space Shuttle, and an orange core stage in the middle. On Artemis II, the solid rocket boosters have something that makes them really unique. They have a giant America 250 logo painted on top of both of them to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, which is in 2026. Pretty cool also, considering that the rocket was made by engineers from every state in the United States. So now that we've talked about our spacecraft, let's discuss the Artemis II mission specifically. As I mentioned before, Artemis II is a test mission. Artemis I, the first test of the Space Launch System, launched back in 2022, and it was an amazing success. But Artemis I was an uncrewed mission, so now it's time to test the full system with crew on board. And this crew is going to be able to test out a lot more of the human-centric features like docking, radiation shielding, communication, and eating. Artemis II will launch from Launchpad 39B at the Kennedy Space Center. Launchpad 39B is really historic. It launched the Apollo 10 mission to the moon, as well as several shuttle missions, and Artemis II will launch no earlier than April 1st, 2026. And when the countdown hits 0, it's going to be the most powerful manned rocket in history. 2 minutes into launch, we're going to jettison the solid rocket boosters and be left with just the core stage powering it into low Earth orbit. And this is where the launch abort system will be jettisoned as well. 8 minutes in, the core stage is out of fuel, and so it's going to separate and fall back to Earth. Well, the second stage, the interim cryogenic propulsion stage, or ICPS, ignites and gives the final push to get the crew into space. After 2 burns, the ICPS is going to have Orion in an elliptical high Earth orbit. And so now Orion is going to be 46,000 miles away from Earth on the far side, and the close side of its orbit is going to be 115 miles away from Earth. And this orbit will take about 1 day to complete. Reid Wiseman will serve as the commander for Artemis II. He's a 27-year Navy veteran, a pilot, a father, an engineer, and a Baltimore native. Wiseman has been an astronaut since 2009, and he has logged 167 days in space. Christina Koch is a mission specialist on Artemis II. She's an electrical engineer and an Arctic explorer, a firefighter, and has worked on major scientific programs for both NASA and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. She grew up on a family farm in Michigan and attended North Carolina State University. She's been an astronaut since 2013 and holds the record as the woman with the longest single spaceflight, almost a full year. And finally, we have Jeremy Hansen. Hansen is a Canadian astronaut, and he will be a mission specialist for Artemis II. He's a pilot, a physicist, a colonel with the Canadian military, an aquanaut, and a father. He first got his wings when he was just 16 years old and became a firefighter pilot for the Royal Canadian Air Force. He became a CSA astronaut in 2009, and in 2017, he became the first Canadian astronaut to lead a NASA astronaut class. And get this, Artemis II will be Hansen's first flight to space. You can't really beat a trip to the moon as your first flight in space. Victor Glover will be the pilot for Artemis II. He's a test pilot, a legislative fellow with the United States Senate, a father, and an engineer from California. He also served with the U.S. military in Operation Iraqi Freedom and has flown 40 aircraft across 24 different combat missions, and he has been an astronaut since 2013. During this first day, Orion's going to separate from the ICPS and begin to do a docking practice maneuver. In the coming years, Orion will dock with the lunar lander and the Gateway station, or whatever commercial station is up there. It may not be Gateway, or maybe NASA will revive Gateway. As you can see, a lot of this is really in flux. The Artemis program is really just a very beautiful mess. I have a whole other video on that, so definitely check that out. So we need to know, how does the autopilot work? Do the thrusters work the way that we expect them to? If you remember the 2 astronauts who were stuck in space for a while, Butch and Suni, last year, They were testing out a new spacecraft called Starliner, and the whole reason that NASA kept them on the space station for months instead of weeks was because of bad thrusters. So we need to make sure that Orion does not have similar issues. Once Orion passes back to Earth, it's going to reignite its engines for a translunar injection, or TLI. This is the final push to get our astronauts to the moon for a free return trajectory. What is a free return trajectory, you may ask? It means that the gravity of the moon and the Earth will just naturally bring Artemis II back home, no additional burns required. So it's not only a great fuel-saving measure, but it's also just a great idea for a test spacecraft like Orion. If anything goes wrong with Artemis II, it will just naturally come back to Earth using gravity alone. This is actually the same flight path that ended up saving the Apollo 13 astronauts after their disaster on the way to the moon. For Artemis II, the journey to the moon is going to take 4 days. During that time, the crew is going to be running emergency procedures, including what to do in case of a major radiation event. I will be covering every development of the Artemis program right here on Orbit Insights. I'll be doing a full series, including videos on why we stopped going to the moon, why we're going back now, the incredible technology that is making this all possible, and more. So make sure to subscribe so that you never miss a moment of humanity's historic return to the lunar surface. And now, let's get back to previewing NASA's Artemis II mission. See, if humans are going to do these long missions that we're talking about, going to the moon or maybe one day going to Mars, we have to figure out how to deal with deep space radiation. Orion has a shelter on board, and the astronauts are going to test and see how effective it is in actual use. Alright, so as I mentioned before, Artemis II is not a lunar landing. The astronauts are not going to be walking on the moon for this mission. This is a lunar flyby mission. If you're at all familiar with the Apollo 8 mission from the 1960s, that's the Christmas Apollo flight, this mission is really similar. The flight is going to take them 230,000 miles away from Earth to the far side of the moon. As you may know, there's a side of the moon that always faces the Earth, and then there's a far side of the moon that we'll never see from standing on the Earth's surface. And that's the destination for our Artemis II astronauts. The closest the astronauts will get to the lunar surface is about 4,600 meters. After the flyby, Orion will do any necessary little corrections that it needs to land precisely at the right place and the right time back on Earth. After another 4 days, Integrity will separate from the ESM and re-enter the atmosphere for splashdown. They will splash down in the Pacific Ocean, be picked up by the United States Navy, and then complete their 10-day mission. There are 4 astronauts aboard Artemis II: Reed Wiseman, Victor Glover, Christina Cook, and Jeremy Hansen. As you might guess, these 4 people are exceptional, some of the best of the best. The exact people you would pick on an Artemis II mission. I'm going to highlight just a couple of things that stood out to me about each one of their bios, but seriously, you need to go read them, so I will make sure to link them in full in the description of this video. These are incredible people who have done amazing things in their lifetimes. And this time, Artemis II has actual humans on board, so don't be surprised if there are a couple of scrubbed launch attempts over the next couple of months. I really hope it launches that weekend though, so that I can see it in person, and as I said, I will be providing full coverage as well. Alright, so those are my thoughts on NASA's Artemis II mission, launching no earlier than April 1st, 2026. Share your thoughts down below, subscribe today, and if you want to learn more about NASA's Artemis program, you can check out the videos on the screen right now.